If you've ever stood beneath the glass pyramid of the Louvre Museum, you probably felt the weight of history pressing in from every direction. Millions of people pass through its doors every year, eyes fixed on masterpieces, cameras ready, minds filled with art, beauty, and awe. But very few realize that behind the museum's serene galleries and climate-controlled vaults lies the record of one of the most audacious crimes in cultural history. A case file that, for decades, sat quietly inside the very building where the crime occurred. This is not a story of ancient wars or lost empires. This is a modern crime carried out in broad daylight, inside one of the most guarded buildings in Europe. And for a long time, it was nearly forgotten, buried in police paperwork, institutional embarrassment, and the myth that something so famous could never truly disappear. This is the true story of how the world's most famous painting vanished from the Louvre, and how the truth of that theft remained hidden inside the landmark itself. On the morning of August 21, 1911, Paris woke up like any other day. The Louvre was closed to the public, as it was every Monday, but inside, workers moved through the galleries performing routine maintenance. Painters touched up walls. Guards made their rounds. No alarms blared, no doors were forced, and yet, by the time the museum reopened the following day, one of its most valuable works was gone. The painting was the Mona Lisa. At first, confusion reigned. Staff assumed the painting had been removed for photography or restoration. It had happened before. Hours passed. Then a full day. When curators finally realized the truth, panic set in. The Mona Lisa, already famous, but not yet the global icon we know today, had vanished without a trace. What followed was one of the largest manhunts in French history, involving border checks, interrogations of artists, and international headlines. Yet what most people don't know is that the most revealing clues never left the Louvre. They were written down, cataloged, and locked away inside the building itself. The crime file was there all along. To understand how this happened, we need to understand what the Louvre was like in 1911. Today, the museum is a fortress of surveillance cameras, motion detectors, and bulletproof glass. But in the early 20th century, security was surprisingly casual. Paintings were hung with simple hooks. Guards were few. Employees came and went with minimal oversight. The idea that someone would steal a masterpiece, especially one so recognizable, seemed almost unthinkable. This complacency created the perfect opportunity. The thief was Vincenzo Peruggia, a 29-year-old Italian handyman who had worked at the Louvre. His job involved installing protective glass on paintings, including the Mona Lisa itself. He knew the building's layout, he knew the routines, and most importantly, he knew how little anyone was watching. On that Monday morning, Peruggia entered the museum wearing a worker's smock, the same kind worn by dozens of employees. He walked directly to the Salon Carré, lifted the painting off the wall, and carried it to a nearby stairwell. There, away from public view, he removed the Mona Lisa from its wooden frame, wrapped it in cloth, and walked out through a staff exit. No one stopped him. By the time guards realized the painting was missing, Peruggia was already gone, carrying Leonardo da Vinci's masterpiece under his coat through the streets of Paris. The theft humiliated the Louvre and shocked the world. Newspapers exploded with speculation. How could the greatest museum on Earth lose its most famous painting? The French government demanded answers. Police sealed the museum and began interrogating everyone who had worked there. Among those questioned were artists and intellectuals who had nothing to do with the crime, including Pablo Picasso and Guillaume Apollinaire. For weeks, rumors overshadowed facts, and false leads consumed investigators' time. But inside the Louvre, administrators quietly began assembling something else, a detailed internal record of the theft. This was not a public document. It was a compilation of guard schedules, staff rosters, maintenance logs, and internal correspondence, an institutional autopsy of how the painting vanished. This crime file, preserved in museum and police archives, revealed uncomfortable truths. It showed that multiple guards had failed to notice the empty space on the wall for hours. It documented how staff initially dismissed concerns rather than escalate them, and it made clear that Perugia's access was not an anomaly, but a flaw in the system. For years, this file remained largely unseen by the public, not because it was classified, but because the museum had no incentive to highlight its own failure. Meanwhile, the world believed the Mona Lisa was lost forever. 2 years passed. The painting's absence transformed it into a legend. Ironically, the theft did more to elevate the Mona Lisa's fame than centuries of admiration ever had. Reproductions appeared everywhere. Songs were written about it. The empty space on the Louvre wall became a tourist attraction in its own right. And then, in late 1913, a break finally came. An art dealer in Florence received a letter from a man claiming to possess the Mona Lisa. He signed it, Leonardo. Suspicious but intrigued, the dealer contacted authorities. When Perugia arrived in Italy with the painting hidden in a trunk, he was arrested. His explanation stunned investigators. Perugia claimed he had stolen the Mona Lisa out of patriotism, believing it had been looted from Italy by France. In reality, Leonardo da Vinci had brought the painting to France legally centuries earlier. But Perugia insisted he was returning a stolen treasure to its homeland. The courts did not fully accept his reasoning, but they sympathized enough to give him a surprisingly light sentence. After just over 2 years missing, the Mona Lisa was returned to the Louvre in January 1914. Publicly, the story ended there. Privately, the crime file was closed and stored away inside the very institution that had been breached. What makes this case so remarkable is not just the theft itself, but what the internal records reveal about institutional memory. The Louvre did not erase the incident. It documented it meticulously. The internal reports led directly to sweeping changes in museum security, not just in Paris, but across Europe. Paintings were rehung with reinforced systems. Access protocols were tightened. Guard training was overhauled. Yet the details of those internal failures, the human errors, the missed warnings, were never highlighted in official narratives. Instead, the story became simplified: a lone thief, a daring act, a triumphant recovery. The full complexity remained inside the archives for decades. Historians who later accessed these records noted something striking: how modern the crime felt. There was no dramatic chase, no mastermind syndicate, just a quiet exploitation of routine, familiarity, and trust. The Louvre had not been defeated by force. It had been outmaneuvered by invisibility. Today, the Mona Lisa sits behind bulletproof glass, guarded by cameras and security personnel. Visitors see her smile, take their photos, and move on, often unaware that she once vanished from this very building. Few realize that the museum they are standing in still houses the paper trail of that disappearance. The forgotten crime file remains a reminder that history doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers, from a locked cabinet, a faded report, or an overlooked document inside a world-famous landmark. The Louvre is not just a monument to art. It is also a record of human error, ambition, and vulnerability. And the story of the Mona Lisa's theft proves something deeply unsettling. Even the most protected treasures in the world can disappear without anyone noticing. So the next time you walk through a historic landmark, remember this: walls don't just hold beauty, they hold secrets, files, failures, stories we rarely hear, even when they happened in plain sight. If you enjoyed uncovering this hidden chapter of history, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss the stories museums don't put on display. Because sometimes, the most fascinating crimes aren't hidden underground or locked behind bars. They're hiding right inside the places we think we know best.